Hello and welcome to the very first episode of College to Career with Prepleaf by Masai. Today, our guest is going to be one of the most important people at Masai, from my understanding anyway, by the name of Rajat Dhariwal. Rajat, can you tell everybody what you actually do?
Yeah, thanks, Pragun. Glad to be here. So I'm the SVP of curriculum. I look after how we teach students at Masai, and I believe right now, there's so much course material available on the web. It's really the way you teach which is going to differentiate how students are going to perform in going forward.
So this is a very chilled out and groovy podcast. What we're going to do in this series is basically talk about interesting journeys of all the people that we know from tech so that you, our audience, can understand what it takes to start your career in tech, going from college to actually starting working in the tech field. And today we are obviously joined with Rajat, who has an illustrious career behind himself. He's also studied in some of the top colleges, not only in India, but actually the world, which include IIT Bombay and Carnegie Mellon. And I'm really excited to understand from you, how have you landed up here? What have you done in your life that's actually made you the head of curriculum and pedagogy in Masai School, right? So let's start with understanding about your family background, because I think everybody is a product of their environment. So before we start understanding about what has made you what you are today, we need to understand where you actually come from.
Sure. Both my parents are doctors. They run their own clinic. All three of us brothers are engineers. We all went to IITs. In fact, it's part of like the
Family of doctors, they didn't push you
yeah.
to actually become doctors as well. I thought that's like a family business situation.
Right. I think we were very lucky that my mother was always like a vagabond when she was young, so she kind of was supporting us. My father is old school, but fortunately, for him, like our happiness really mattered. So he never pushed us too much. I mean, he always said that I would prefer if at least one of you took over my hospital, but unfortunately, none of us did. But yeah, all three of us went to IITs. Were fortunate to get selected. I know that it's in part of like the Limca Book of Records and whatnot. But I think importantly, I loved math. And when I went to Kota for my JEE coaching,
Woo.
Bansal classes, and for me, I mean, later now when I see Kota factory and all that, and I see so many of them going through almost like a torture and whatnot. For me, I had a ball. It was like every day I would get this amazing math puzzles to solve, physics puzzles to solve. So I would like jump and look forward to go to the coaching classes and be the first one to answer and whatnot. So I actually really enjoyed that time. And I think I was very lucky to get selected in IIT Bombay computer science program, where I think, yeah, truly some of the brightest minds come. So in some sense, again, it was very competitive and all that. But again, at IIT, I had a ball. Different people have had different experiences.
No. You're going far too ahead. We don't want to go that far, right? We're not in
Okay.
Bombay. Let's come back to your hometown.
Sure.
Let's come back to so in a middle class, I come from a middle class family, right? And
Mm.
the entire thing growing up for me was you need to become an engineer. You need to become an engineer. You need to become an engineer, right?
Yeah.
And you come from a family where the pressure would actually be in the direction of, let's say, hey, you should become a doctor. One of you should become a doctor. Somebody become a doctor, right?
Right.
But your interests, and as it turns out, you and your brother's interests lied in engineering. I understand that you really like math,
Yeah.
but why the interest in becoming an engineer? What prospects did you see for yourself when you were growing up? Was there like an aspiration to be an engineer, or it was just an
Um,
interest-based thing that you really wanted to pursue?
okay. यहाँ पे I like to give an honest answer. I was interested in math, so I went to Bansal classes. I love that part. Then I think assumed somewhere that I'll get to do more of this when I go to IIT. And IIT Kota mein, it's like all you hear day in and day out. So you don't really question. It was not about engineering so much. It was like, okay, इसकी पढ़ाई में इतना मजा आया तो आगे भी बहुत और मजा आएगा. So I went in like that. And generally also I think never thought about so much about money and career कि बहुत अच्छा जॉब मिल जाएगा आईआईटी से and all that. It was just कि हाँ whatever I was doing here, maybe I'll get 10x at IIT. So it was really that for me.
So you're telling me that when you were growing up, your entire thing was to thirst to actually study. मतलब मैं तो मतलब chill मार रहा था, मोमो खाते थे, मतलब
हम्म,
movies देखने जाते थे, class bunk करते थे, but you were actually excited about like
हाँ मतलब actually वहां पे ना I was a odd nut because I basically I think in us as a brought up this thing was instilled कि do what you're passionate about and we were allowed to do that. So I was really कि हाँ बहुत मजा आ रहा है तो ये कर रहे हैं. But also I used to love playing cricket, sports, anything. Kota mein my friends would study literally 14 to 18 hours a day every day. And so it would be very difficult to get like a play group to play cricket. Like maybe I would get a play group to play once a day in a week. And that was not enough. I had to play every day. So I had three, four different friend circles. एक दिन इसके साथ खेला, एक दिन इसके साथ, एक दिन इसके साथ. And my mom used to live with me. I mean, I'm from Jodhpur, but I studied in Kota. So my mother lived with me for 3 years. She left her profession and family and all that. So she was cool with it. But when my dad would find out कि इसकी grade कम आई है, then she would, I mean, he would kind of first kind of tell her not so nice words कि ये दिन भर cricket खेलेगा तो यही होगा ना, and then he would tell me. So, but my mom was cool, so it was okay. But I remember एक बार I was playing cricket, काफी time हो गया था. My mom came on the ground, सबके सामने she scolded and took me back, and I was so embarrassed. 10 दिन तक मैं किसी से मिलने नहीं गया. I was really embarrassed. Then the 11th day when I went to meet, एक सुपर कमांडो ध्रुव होता था ना, आई डोंट नो आपको पता, नागराज और सुपर कमांडो ध्रुव उनकी कॉमिक्स होती थी. तो मतलब यू वोंट बिलीव एक कॉमिक पढ़ी थी जिसका टाइटल था मम्मी का कहर. इट वाज द इजिप्शियन मम्मी की बात थी, वेयर ही गोस टू इजिप्ट. बट वो टाइटल हम सबने देखा एंड वी ऑल लाफ. Nobody had to say anything and that ice was broken.
But like, you know what? You've actually touched upon something that at least मेरे को, क्योंकि मैंने इंजीनियरिंग कभी करने का नहीं सोचा जिंदगी में, कभी नहीं सोचा कर. Obviously, everybody asked me to do it in my family or science law or ये law or वो law. But people like you who at a very young age decide मुझे engineering करना है, because Kota, getting into the whole Kota factory का setup is basically at a very young age you've taken a choice, make your career in a certain way. I want to, like, I know that this is supposed to be a light, chilled out and groovy like podcast, but I actually want to understand like what kind of pressures like do students and people who are studying in that regime, in that regiment, what kind of pressures exist for people who are going to like, who are doing like 7 hours of school and then like 5 hours of like
Okay. So,
training and
okay, couple of fun facts there before I answer that. Nobody goes to school there, like literally. So the school that I was enrolled in, उस school के जो principal थे, he was our chemistry teacher at our coaching institute. So the coaching institute had a arrangement कि ये लोग स्कूल नहीं आएंगे जो बंसल वाले हैं और स्पेशली जो ए बैच में हैं, और इनको आप देख लेना, संभाल लेना टाइप्स, तो वी आई नेवर वेंट टू, आई मीन, हाँ आई रिमेम्बर मैथ के एग्जाम में तो आई मीन इट यूज्ड टू बी सो इजी स्कूल वाला कि 3 घंटे का एग्जाम होता था एंड वी वर ऑल अबाउट नॉट वेस्टिंग इवन अ सेकंड. सो आई वुड गो लिटरली 2 hours लेट टू द सेंटर, finish the entire paper in half an hour and then come back. So yeah, that was only for like some mandatory exams we had to give. But so nobody used to go to school. 12th boards also.
that same story, by the way, where I would go into a maths test and I will finish it in 30 minutes. But your thing is that you actually knew all the answers. I had no idea about any of it. So I would literally just look at the paper. I'll know 2 or 3 questions. I'll quickly finish them and then I'll leave. So I'm glad that we have like common grounds like this.
Right, right. But yeah, when it comes to stress, again, I think because I enjoyed it, I never felt that stress. But I think the biggest thing was that everybody, pretty much everybody who came to Kota, to these coaching institutes, was a topper in their school बचपन से first आ रहे, second आ रहे, third आ रहे. यहाँ पे आके suddenly they find at the bottom of the batch, and that took quite a few of them, like it was a shock to them. उनको समझ ही नहीं आती कि हुआ क्या एकदम से मेरा IQ इतना ड्रॉप हो गया, what has happened. So some of them of course went into depression. I think I was naive. I didn't make a lot of note of that, I would say. But हाँ, I had a thing कि मुझे साथ में पढ़ना होता था, अकेले नहीं पढ़ पाता था, और मुझे अच्छे लोग चाहिए होते थे. और ये जो सारे, मतलब आई वाज इन द ए बैच, बट बाकी जो होते थे ना, थोड़े स्नूटी से, थोड़े से वैसे अनअप्रोचेबल होते थे. तो आए समाव मेरे जितने फ्रेंड्स थे, मेरे जो स्टडी ग्रुप से, दे वर ऑल स्टूडेंट्स फ्रॉम सी बैच, डी बैच, ई बैच. बट आई वाज सो हैप्पी विद देम. कभी कभी लाइक मेरे जो बाकी एक दो फ्रेंड्स थे ए बी बैच में, दे वुड से कि यार उनके साथ क्यों पढ़ रहे हैं, उनके साथ क्या फायदा होगा एंड ऑल दैट. बट यार
AB batches?
हाँ, मतलब बंसल में लाइक वी हैड ए बी सी डी. सो द टॉप लॉट वुड गो टू द ए बैच. ए में भी A1 A2 A3 होते थे, B1. सो देयर वर 15 बैचेस, and they were kind of graded by every month or 2 months, based on your rank. You would go up and down. It was a very competitive process that way.
Yeah, and talking of competitive processes, at the end of this, you obviously give the entrance exam
Right.
and made it to IIT Bombay. So before we get into it, like, I want to know, what were you feeling like the night before you were going to go give your
Wow, great question actually. Yeah, I was just generally chilled out. मतलब कि मैं ज्यादा ये सब चीजें उस टाइम सोचता नहीं था. More out of being naive, more than anything else. तो I remember the night before I called my friend, and मैंने उसको कॉल किया. He was obviously nervous, and I was telling कि यार मुझे टेंशन हो रही है. बोला यार तो सबको ही हो रही है, उसमें क्या है. मैंने कहा नहीं, मुझे ये टेंशन हो रही है कि मुझे टेंशन क्यों नहीं हो रही है. यू नो कि मुझे भी होनी चाहिए. मेरे घर वाले देरली एबल टू ब्रीथ, सब लोग इतना टेंस में, फ्रेंड्स, बट मुझे तो ऐसा कुछ लग नहीं रहा है. मिसिंग समथिंग. माय एल्डर ब्रदर हु हैड ऑलरेडी क्लियर्ड आईआईटी, ही आस्क्ड मी, he's like very studious and all that, so he the moment I came out of the IIT paper, he was like, अच्छा कितने मार्क्स आने वाले हैं, क्या कौन सी रैंक आएगी, क्या होगा. I was like, I don't know. And then he screamed, तुझे ये भी नहीं पता कि इतना ये. Then I made up some number just to calm him down. हम 60 शायद आ जाएंगे, उतना अच्छा गया and all that. But the next morning I was sleeping, and I remember my younger brother came running, and we were very close. He's like, अबे, मेरा नाम छोटू था घर पे. छोटू उठ 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 उठ. So I was like very, in half asleep. Like, अबे छोटू उठ, तेरी 54 रैंक आ गई साले. कभी सोचा था तूने, उठ जल्दी. And I was like कि क्या बोल रहा है. I went back to sleep. And for a week after that, I was like कि ये लोग, मतलब अखबार में कल कोई आर्टिकल आएगा, because you think you are the center of the universe, कि ये जो 54 रैंक जो निकली है ना, वो वाला कैंडिडेट, ये हमने गलत इवेल्युएट किया है, इसका कुछ और होगा. It took like a week, 2 weeks to sink in.
Yeah, so as we were saying, when you found out about your rank, did that, like, because future always looks a little hazy, you know what I mean? Especially when you get into like doing one of these competitive exams. What if you don't get the right rank? You have to re-evaluate whatever it is that you were planning to do with your life for so long. You have, for at least 2 years, you were seriously studying for it, right? But then you get the rank that you wanted or thought that you can get. Does that like crystallize the future for you? Does that make that haziness sort of just disappear, and then you have a clear path? Okay, this is what I'm going to be doing in life. I've cracked it. I will be going into one of the top 3 like IITs, and
Right.
like, did that happen after the week that it took you to realize how well you scored?
नहीं नहीं, वो तो नहीं हुआ. आई थिंक अगेन बिकॉज ऑफ आवर ब्रॉट अप, आई थिंक इट वाज वेरी वेरी ग्राउंडेड, ऑल ऑफ अस वेरी हम्बल. तो वो सब नहीं. मुझे जो जेन्युइनली खुशी हुई, या जब ये फील हुआ ना, वो वन वाज व्हेन आई सॉ माय रैंक वाज डिक्लेयर्ड, एंड मॉर्निंग आई वेंट एंड टच माय फादर्स फीट, एंड आई वाज लुकिंग फॉर माय मदर. आई कुडंट फाइंड हर. एंड देखा, वो पापा ने बोला वो सुबह से 5 बजे या 6 बजे, पता नहीं कब से मंदिर में ही बैठी है. तो 3-4 घंटे बाद निकली. Especially because she spent 3 years with us, and kind of took a lot of flack also from the family, because my father was alone, and all these things. And Jodhpur mein tab tha nahi IIT. So that was one big moment. But this is something, I think, for Masai, I tell the students that you go through this rigor every day. You will not realize it day 1, day 2, day 30, because हर दिन थोड़ा थोड़ा increment हो रहा है. But if you meet your own version 6 months ago, or a friend who was at a similar level, you will very, very clearly, palpably see the difference.
Yeah. That's intense. And I think that's actually so true. Everybody in my team, and they keep asking me like, oh, like, you write really nice content, how do you do it? And I'm like, I just have written it so much that
Right.
I can't give you an answer how to do it. I've just
Right.
done it so much that I can now do it. And I think, like, do you think that there is a lot of untapped potential in this country because of that kind of a situation where, like, college and school as well as college education in this country is uh, we know the state of colleges in India, and we know the state of schools in India. You went to a nice, you and I both come from a certain privilege, right? So we get our lives are very different than
Right.
most of
Yeah.
this country. But do you think that we are underhandedly, like, losing a lot of potential in this country because our education system
Yeah.
is
I mean,
uh,
there is no doubt about it. It's undoubtedly that is happening, and there are so many examples. I can give, like including our own son. The fact how. So I've been a teacher in a school also. So after my IIT and my masters, and then working at Amazon, playing dodgeball with Jeff Bezos, that I definitely wanted to get captured on this
you
podcast.
played you played what are you saying?
Yeah, yeah. This time it was a
Oh,
small company. We were all huddled up in Queens Hill in a single building. And yeah, we used to have dodgeball matches. He was on the other team. I was in the AWS team. This time AWS just start ho raha tha.
yeah,
You can't
they
think
have
of.
one server, and now they have servers covering most of this world.
Right, right. So anyway, but after all that, I mean, the anti-climax or climax is that I left all that and I started teaching kids in a school in India, because I felt my heart kind of really lied there, and I wanted to change the education system, this time youth and rebelliousness and all that. I felt there's a lot of corruption and whatnot, and my nature is not such that I will form a political party and fight that way. I felt that by educating this young generation in a certain way, this generation will be ready and will be honest, not be corrupt, and will be progressively thinking and all that. So that's how I got into sort of school education. So I've taught a lot of children in schools also, but even then, I believe so little in schooling. Our son is 7 years old now. He's never been to a school
Oh,
because I know,
really?
yeah, yeah, he's homeschooled. Both me and my wife, we both actually are batchmates from IIT Bombay, computer science, same batch and everything. And we both ended up teaching, so we kind of teach him and take care of him because education system, one at a very practical level, scale is the issue. Forget teachers' motivation and our style of delivery and all that. But just if you are teaching even 25 students, our son went to a school for a few months, but he would like cry every day. And we felt it was separation anxiety. But then when we went to the school, started volunteering there, it's a rural school here, we just saw that he was not challenged enough. He just got bored at school. घर पे he used to ask us questions. We will tell him अच्छा अब ये करो अब ये करो. तो personalized attention मिल ही नहीं सकता है. एंड बाकी क्या टीचिंग क्वालिटी और उसका तो मतलब क्या ही बोले. So yeah.
Yeah, it is quite disappointing. But one place I know the teaching quality ought to be good, and I can be very wrong about it, is
Hmm.
IIT Bombay. So
हाँ,
what
okay. There.
expectations did you get to IIT with? Like, what? Because I didn't go to a very,
Right,
like,
right,
I didn't go to an IIT Bombay. I went to a college in DU. You know what I mean?
right.
So us, when we were standing outside, it was basically I could only see the next 3 years of chilling and hanging out and meeting people and all of that. I'm sure your experience of standing right outside IIT before the first time you went in would have been very different.
Yeah, it was very different. Okay, I have an interesting story. People may not believe this, but teaching quality, now that I've studied curriculum and pedagogy for so many years, we as students and general laymen, we are not able to separate subject matter expert or let's say an expert from a teacher. So an expert is somebody who knows the subject well. Teacher is somebody who can teach it well. The two of them are very different things.
Not related
Uh,
at all.
and I give
Absolutely.
this example. I don't know if I should on a podcast, but my
You can
father-in-law
say
is a
whatever
great
you want
example.
on this podcast, whatever you want. If you want to talk about Jeff Bezos's bald head, we are open to talk about it. Yeah, go on.
नहीं, नहीं, उतना नहीं जाऊंगा. I'm just so my father-in-law, for example, he's the expert at bridge. the card game. So he's like a national champion. He wins like international contests and whatnot. And he feels that I am the kind of one who will carry on sort of the family legacy of sorts. Right. So he always tries to teach me, but he's just unfortunately a very poor teacher. He will have like an hour's conversation, and then I'll have to go to YouTube and this and that, and then it'll take me like 2-3 days. Achha, this is what you were saying. I mean, tell me all the basics first. But yeah, that's one example. But at IIT, I want to give another example. We had a professor. He was brilliant. He was a brilliant researcher, and he was somebody jisko Google would fly to San Francisco to hire their senior executives, for the interview, and then fly him back. He used to like publish he would like teach one subject, but he would sit in other seminars and just, ask questions as if he knows that for a long time. But he was a terrible teacher. And हम लोग मजाक में बोलते थे कि यार ये जब सर आते हैं तो इनका क्या बोलते हैं, हाँ, इनका माइक्रोफोन चालू होता है और हमारा टाइपराइटर, मतलब कि वो बोलते रहते हैं, एंड वी एक्सेप्ट आर लाइक द डिपार्टमेंट रैंक वन, DR1 हम बोलते थे, ही यूज्ड टू ओनली अंडरस्टैंड एंड बी एबल टू रिस्पॉन्ड हिम इन द क्लास. रेस्ट ऑल ऑफ अस वर लाइक लेट्स नॉट मिस इवन वन वर्ड, बिकॉज एक हफ्ता लगेगा ये एक क्लास समझने में. यू जस्ट राइट एवरीथिंग, इट वुड लिटरली टेक अस a week to understand all that he said. So the entire batch, after a month of his classes, went to the head of the department. Very nice guy. And we told him, sir, whatever he is teaching, none of us are getting anything. Can you please do something about it? And he said, I know exactly what you're saying, because he cracks 10 jokes in the faculty meeting. And उसमें से हम सबको एक समझ आता है. So I can totally understand. But the point is, the institute really needs him. His work is very high quality. So here is what I'm going to do. And he says that I'm going to call a meeting, faculty meeting for your batch, because I can't single him out. And you all come and make sure you have questions for every faculty member. Don't single one person out, him out. And then whatever you ask him, I'll make sure to follow up on that, and some changes will take place. But okay, so all this charade was created. The day was finalized. We all came. All the teachers came. Every professor came except him. We didn't know what to say, whether to laugh or cry.
देखो ये चल रहा है IITs में, ये चल रहा है, ठीक है. यहाँ पे बच्चे बैठ के प्लॉट कर रहे हैं टीचर्स के साथ कि बाकी टीचर्स को कैसे लें, and then that teacher is too clever for all of this. Anyway.
Very likely he figured it all out. That was very smart. और मतलब एक और टीचर थे, वो बस अपनी बुक, उनकी PPT थी, बस he would just switch it on and just go through slides. Again, very, very poor. That was databases. I mean, it was such an amazing topic. Later I found out. On the other hand, there was another teacher. He was so good. एक दो टीचर्स थे amazingly inspiring. So एक math teacher था. We used to have two math teachers because 450 students in a batch, so 225 in one, 225 in one, just for management purpose, because the hall could accommodate only 300 or so. That teacher was so good. It was like a Rajnikant movie when his lecture started. People are sitting on stairs and standing, writing notes. Matlab, they were crazy. And institute ki taraf se so much pressure ki why are you not attending your section and this, that, and nothing mattered. The other was in computer science, we had a teacher. He was such an amazing teacher. और उनका जब पेपर आता था, मतलब जो एग्जाम लेते थे वो, तो एग्जाम में समोसे बढ़ते थे, क्योंकि उनका होता था ओपन बुक एग्जाम. वो बोलते थे कि जो देखना है आपको, बुक लानी है, जो करना है, ब्रिंग एवरीथिंग, कंसल्ट व्हाटएवर यू वांट, एंड आई विल गिव यू जस्ट 5 क्वेश्चंस एंड यू टेक एज मच टाइम एज यू वांट टू सॉल्व. जब पहली बार उनका एग्जाम था, आई वाज लाइक क्या सही है, तो वी वर ऑल काइंड ऑफ हैप्पी कि ठीक है, फटाफट कर लेंगे, बुक लेगा, खूब सारे नोट्स बना लिए, एंड इट वाज अ ट्रैप, एब्सोल्यूट ट्रैप. So one of those 5 questions were like giant onions, each of them. You peel one layer, second layer, in those 5-6 statements, but it was a beautiful question. मतलब एंड तक मजा आ गया था. बच्चे सुबह जाते थे, 9 बजे बैठते थे, और कोई 6 घंटे बैठा है, कोई 8 घंटे बैठा है, एवरेज वॉज 8 आवर्स, कोई 10 घंटे बैठा है, वो भी पूरे टाइम बैठे हैं, बीच में चाय मंगा रहे हैं सबके लिए, हर 2-2 घंटे में समोसे मंगा रहे हैं. तो इट वॉज अनदर एक्सपीरियंस ऑल टुगेदर. तो ऐसे भी टीचर्स थे.
That's wonderful. And you know what, like that's so nice to hear, because bahar se I've never seen a engineering class, and I'm guessing a lot of people who are watching and hearing us, they are sitting in those classes. I have this like idea of just a bunch of students sitting and a lecture going on in an engineering college, and one person just like falling asleep and drooling. And it's so nice to hear that there was actually like interesting ways and means in which learning was given out in these premier institutes of our country. One question I do want to ask you is that आपके IIT के बाहर भी लोग होंगे, like friends and all, right? There are hundreds and thousands of engineering colleges in this country, hundreds and thousands of engineering colleges in the country, right? Not all of them are even 5% of what IIT Bombay is, right? So I want you to tell our audience, like, what are 2 or 3 things that no matter which college you're in, you can do for yourself that can elevate your learning experience, And I'm not just asking you as a graduate of IIT Bombay and, as a Carnegie Mellon. I'm asking you as a person who actually genuinely believes in the idea of an alternative form of teaching. You're putting your kid through that. You're not a person who's, just saying these things for the sake of it. I don't want to. Varun, who's producing this podcast, will hate me. But not for the sake of it. So what do you think those are 2 or 3 things that you can tell students who are studying in engineering colleges?
As I told you, after my Amazon working as a developer, then I started teaching kids. And for many years, I taught kids. I never really actively coded per se. For कई साल बाद I started a startup. And if I can show you 2-3 images by a screen share, is that okay? From my laptop? Yeah, these I shared them in the student scrum the other day, and there were some very powerful responses. So I thought maybe okay, is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
So this is so our startup that I'd opened about maybe 12 years ago, which was on making board games for kids. So the idea was that children should be actively engaged rather than using screens and so on. Even back then, the screen time had started increasing at an alarming rate. So this was the first one. We created like the first Indian language word game, kind of like a Hindi Scrabble, you can say. Got a lot of media. And then, we were told by the investors that this is something that has a very small market size. You need to do something which can reach more people. So we created this another game called Madzel. This which was very international in its design and appeal and so on. It kind of redid the whole puzzle category. But iske baad, then we really wanted to go big, and there the bottleneck came that children are hooked to video games. They are not going to play these board games. This market is going to be a fraction of what the video games is. So you need to make something as exciting, and we didn't want to go away from our core value that children should be active. So this is where we came up with this idea: what if you have okay? Let me show you the product. What we ended up with. So this is what we ended up creating.
Oh, nice.
Super Suit, it was the first wearable gaming platform. So this suit that you wear, and then there's a glove. It has all kinds of gesture control and all of that. And you zap each other. You have very interesting gameplays, and you are the sort of the video game character. It's like a PlayStation you're wearing. You can think, you can say that. So you would run around and all that. So we did this, and we became, in fact, one of the first Indian startups to be showcased at CES, Consumer Electronics Show at Vegas, which is the biggest tech event where all these Samsung and all announced their phones. And then we were invited to speak a few months later at MWC, Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, things which, as a board game company, we never thought we would get opportunities. अब ये पूरा electronics engineering है, which anyway I'm from computer science and which I had never coded. And this, because there was a board games team, so I had to build the whole team. I had to have an understanding. तो यहाँ पे I kind of really saw for the first time कि अच्छा coding नहीं की, इसका मतलब ये नहीं coding भूल गए, syntax भूल गए. So what was coding about? What was programming about? What was tech about? That has stayed with me. And as a teacher now, like at Masai, that is exactly my job, to break down what are those essentials. And I always keep telling students, यार go सीखो. आज पाइथन है, जावास्क्रिप्ट है, जो भी है, कल को कुछ और आ जाएगा, एआई से करवाना होगा आधा काम, या you have voice based coding, syntax doesn't matter, AI will figure out those commas and semicolons. So don't worry about those. Pick up decomposition, abstraction, algorithmic thinking. Pick up these skills. These are what are going to stay with you. So I think that was my big learning, that I think these are skills that I built well at IIT.
Nice. And I think that that's a great point for people who are, trying to get into software development in general. Because, I mean, we're not going to plug product here, but you can literally, like, in this day and age, you can learn anything anywhere, from scratch. You know what I mean? You can go on YouTube and, learn how to, like, be a carpenter if you want to be, right? What you don't end up learning are nuances, and those nuances actually make all the difference, in the real world. But it's good to hear about your experience at IIT Bombay. You were done with IIT Bombay. आपका placement तो लगा होगा बढ़िया एकदम.
Yeah, I did get placed at Oracle, I remember, from IIT. But I was really interested in robotics, artificial intelligence. So I went for my master's to Carnegie Mellon, which is sort of the mecca of robotics. It's the #1 ranked university, even ahead of MIT in that particular field. Yeah, it was amazing. I think there the teaching quality was much higher. I have to say that. I mean, the teachers were absolute subject matter experts, but they were really good teachers. I mean, the presentation material and the assignments and everything, it was amazing. बट वहां जाके पता नहीं बोलना चाहिए नहीं, बट वहां जाके एक अलग कीड़ा हो गया कि यार यहाँ कहाँ आ गए, इंडिया के लिए कुछ करना था यहाँ आके. आई रिमेम्बर आई रोट एन ईमेल टू माय प्रोफेसर. 3 महीने बचे थे मुझे डिग्री मिलने में, एंड मैं इंडिया आ गया. आई गॉट मैरिड इन फैक्ट ड्यूरिंग दैट टाइम. पता नहीं, आई वाज वेरी यंग, लोग बोल रहे थे बाल विवाह हो गया. बट एनीवे आई गॉट मैरिड. आई टोल्ड माय फादर कि देखो जो सीखना था पिछले 1 साल में मैंने सीख लिया. एंड आई फिनिश लाइक द 2 year कोर्स इन लाइक 1 year. खाली 3 credits बचे थे, for which I needed 3 more months. So I said कि whatever knowledge I had to gather, I have gathered. No point going back. It's just a degree ठप्पा that I'll get. But he was like, नहीं नहीं, what are you saying? ऐसे थोड़ी होता है, अभी थोड़ी पता है, कल को मूड बदल गया तो बाद में थोड़ी कर पाओगे, this that. So I reluctantly went back. But then I was, into reading all these books कि life का purpose क्या है, ये क्या है, Indian education system पे, exploring views of educationists and whatnot. So I used to just be in the Carnegie Mellon library whole day, not go to any classes, nothing. Exam time आ गया, so I wrote an email to my professor that, dear sir, I had this vision, and this was genuine. I had this vision कि even if I build a rocket all by myself from my Carnegie Mellon degree and I launch it into the space, and what will it do? It'll probably collide with maybe with an asteroid or moon or a planet, and maybe shake it a little bit.
Chinese satellite. Things run into Chinese satellites a lot when you launch them.
Right.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, sure. So, it'll, like, to the universe, it'll hardly make any difference. So I've had this vision, and so that's why I've not been attending classes and so on. But unfortunately, my father hasn't had any such vision. So it'll be great if you can pass me. And he also sent a cheeky response, and I mean, basically, he said, "I can't do that. It'll be unfair to others, obviously." So I gave the exam. Somehow I passed. I mean, I found out later. I gave the exam next day. When the exams got over, I came back. एक वो OPT या कुछ लेना होता ना, I didn't take any of that. Like if you have to re-enter India, sorry, US. And I came back later. I found out I did get passed. My degree got mailed to me and all that. But I forget where was I going with all this.
Exactly the point of this podcast.
अभी तो यहीं पे.
No, but you said something very interesting there. कि Carnegie Mellon में, like, standard of teaching was much higher, right? That's too generic a statement. I want to know more. Like, what do you mean by that? Like, what made you feel that it's very different?
Yeah, I remember one particular course. So my favorite course, computer vision pe. And computer vision was my core area of interest. So वहाँ पे जैसे the professor would teach, I mean, he would put in so much effort in planning his class कि मेरी screen पे क्या है इस वक्त, students को क्या दिख रहा है. If I want to ask them an interactive question, then how will I keep the content on and the question on? Where will I record the responses? So he designed these special PowerPoint templates, which he used to joke that I'm going to trademark this one day, where like half the screen would be the question and half he could pull up the assignment. And choti cheezein, he used to plan it, the whole thing so meticulously. And it used to remind me of this PPT thing in IIT where, you just put on the slideshow, next, and just almost like screenshots of his books. And I was like, yeah, how amazing is this, So
Do you
things
think
like
that
that.
there's a difference in what is perceived to be college? Do you think that there's a difference in what is perceived to be college education and college learning between India and, let's say, countries abroad? And I'm not just talking about India, I suppose, but in developing countries and in countries which are slightly more established. Like I hear similar things from my friends studying at Harvard or Oxford, that they come back with that same kind of like feeling of, you know,
Yeah.
it's
मतलब
almost
इसमें एक बड़ा डिफरेंस तो स्टूडेंट साइड पे है, which is because of I guess the society, the way Indian society is versus Western society in terms of this. हम लोग ज्यादा सोचते नहीं है, मतलब भेड़ चाल होती है बहुत. But the difference I found very early on there was that जो US students थे, yeah, they kind of the two things. I mean, they were really in college in that class because they wanted to learn that. They were not there for a thappa, by and large. Uh, and the other, I think is that uh, they knew what they knew, and they knew equally well what they didn't know.
that's very
There's
important.
definitely a difference in articulation also, but even aside from that, very quickly they were able to say, okay, I don't know this, I need to find out. Indian students were all over the place. You can't tell if they don't know it, they're just fluffing it, they're just kind of thinking on their feet, or they actually know it. So those were a couple of differences. And I think because of that, societal expectations, student expectation, I think the teaching also kind of maybe gets informed from that.
Yeah, I read a really interesting study. I don't remember where now. It was some study I read on JSTOR or something, but it was basically about, how overpopulation in India leads to a competitiveness which you do not actually see in more sparsely populated countries, right? So that competitiveness plays out psychologically in a way where there is almost like a survival of the fittest mentality, and nobody actually wants to do the actual work to survive. They want to find ways in which that they can do it quicker rather than do it properly. And I think that is what you're sort of like referring to here, which I find very interesting based on your experience and what I've read. So that's an interesting point that you've mentioned. But Carnegie Mellon, coming back to the serious part of this podcast, Carnegie Mellon, you finished your course now.
Yeah.
Clearly, you started
Yes.
working at Amazon. And I've seen videos of like the old Amazon like shed of an office where like Bezos will sit in this tiny ass room with the little like computer screen with on his tiny ass desk.
Right.
I want to know like what the hell was that like? Like how did you land up there? Did you know like that time it was just a library of books, right? Did you
Right.
know the potential it had, because Bezos says that he always knew the potential it had. So yeah.
नहीं यार, मेरे लिए तो बिल्कुल नहीं. I remember campus पे Amazon had come, Carnegie Mellon में I went for the interview. What the question that closed there actually अपना इंडिया का जो गंदा एजुकेशन सिस्टम है ना, रोट लर्निंग वाला, वो बहुत काम आया. Amazon का इंटरव्यू उसकी वजह से क्रैक हुआ. तो पता नहीं आपको याद होगा या नहीं, बट वी वर टोल्ड कि 30 तक स्क्वायर्स तो रटे होने ही है हर नंबर के, है ना, एंड 20 या 12 तक क्यूब्स रटे होने हैं. तो दैट वाज लाइक अ थिंग कि हाँ ये तो पता ही है, 27 स्क्वायर कोई बोलेगा आज भी तो 729 नींद में से निकल के आएगा,
Shaking my
है
head
ना.
out of politeness, but I know like square root of 9, and I think that's but yeah, but I believe in you. I believe in you. Let's go. Yeah.
So anyway, the question he asked, it ended up in like a sort of a binomial expression, which was 27 raised to power 0 plus 27 raised to power 1 plus 27 raised to power 2. And I wrote that and I immediately said 757. And he was just kind of shocked that what are you saying. And then he took out his calculator, computed it, and he kept looking at me in like disbelief. And it came out to be 757. And I think that was why I got hired. Like he was like blown away by that. He thought I'm like Shakuntala Devi or something. Jabki for me, it was very easy. 27 square is 729. 27 raised to power 0 is 1. So 729 and 1 is 730. And then rest is just 27. So it was like very easy. I was like, what is he amazed about? But anyways, that
I
was
just
what
heard
got
20
me into.
square, by the way. That's all I heard. Like I heard 27 followed by other 27s. But come on, you're cleverer than me. We've established that. Go on, go on. Yeah.
Then I think I went to Seattle, which was like the other side of the country, Pittsburgh to Seattle. I was very glad that they reimbursed $500 because actually I flew from India to Seattle, which was $1,000. So they reimbursed like half of it. These are small things I remember, which I was very excited. They paid for my like moving the stuff. All this was very new, and India में पता नहीं होता था या नहीं. But वहाँ पे it was a norm. I was like, wow. They gave like an amazing room, sorry, a 2 BHK thing situated on the lake in Seattle. So I went there and I was like amazed. Working at Amazon, though, you mentioned being in a garage. That was a core value at Amazon, frugality. So even, I mean, I when I joined, it was not that small. It was still in like a 8 floor building. But we used to work on these wooden log desks. Everybody had these wooden log desks, not fancy cubicles. And that was basically said that to remind of the humble beginnings and of frugality. So we worked on that. Super smart minds. To be honest, ना मैं मतलब वहाँ पे I discovered things about myself that I kind of didn't like doing what everybody was doing. So Amazon में in the conversation I picked up the team had some issue, so I made like a separate dashboard for that, which ended up helping the team quite a bit, and I enjoyed that part. So I think धीरे धीरे वहाँ पे I discovered my love for entrepreneurship, doing my own thing. बाकी हाँ मतलब it was fun, but I mean, I got married 6 days after my marriage. I had to come and join Amazon. So, and my wife was supposed to join me. And I was looking forward to sharing this like lake wala beautiful house, and I, bought all kinds of things. But her visa got rejected. So I think that also contributed to me going back much earlier than I would have. The main reason was still sort of, always working on Indian education system and whatnot.
Last couple of things I'm going to talk to you about. We've already gone overboard. But it's been a really nice time chatting with you. It's been so interesting for me. One thing I want to ask you is like whoever's listening to us, they are in some way, learning right now, right? And you work in a field that I personally don't know anybody. Like you remember when I met you the first time and I was like, we have a department of curriculum and pedagogy. I want to understand from you that what are the 2 or 3 really important things that people like students who are listening to us, they need to know about. They need to know about when they are making life decisions on where do I want to study, what courses should I pick, what are the things I need to upskill on. From your point of view, what should be the main 2 or 3 decision drivers for the students in when they're taking a decision like that?
I think curriculum today is free. You can get it on the web anywhere in many places. So I would say students don't pay for curriculum. You don't need to. I think you pay for pedagogy. मतलब कि how it's being taught. And especially if you want to get at a level, learn a skill like web development or become a SD at like a serious company, get like a 5, 10 LPA, 20 LPA kind of job, build a career in that direction. You need that. मतलब there'll be of course always a few जो खुद से कर लेंगे figure out. I'm not talking about those. They will anyway find their own path. But
Like
for the majority, I think find out the profile of instructors. They need to be very passionate. Find out how things are being taught. So maybe an example would be just say at Masai, for example, we focus a lot on building mental models. We do not focus on giving knowledge to students, right? Again, I have one graphic. If I can just share my screen, is that
you can
okay?
do whatever you want, sir.
So this is part of sort of the, let's say, instructor training, where we say that, we ask the instructors that, what's the difference between a junior SD, a senior SD, software developer, a technical architect, or a CTO. It's not like if you become a CTO, JavaScript is going to send you like a special password that, okay, now you have access to these new commands, right? It's the same command available to everybody democratically, same everything. So what's the difference? The difference is how they hold that information in their mind. What are the mental models that they are working with, that they have created? How the knowledge is organized in their brain, right? That's the big difference. So when we are teaching students, then instead of giving them just the knowledge, where the danger, and in 95% cases, this is what is going to happen. That knowledge is going to become like a cotton ball. Sab, ulaj jayega, gutham gutha ho jayega. Because students come from a very poor learning background, not just a poor economic background, but they've not been taught meta learning skills, how to organize information and whatnot. Instead of that, can we give them information like this? So one is, cotton ball, and one is, or like गांव में जिस तरह से रास्ते होंगे, उलझे हुए, or versus like a map of city like Chandigarh, very sorted. And so what does that mean? It means that if you're teaching web development, if you're introducing it, then rather than jumping into syntax on day one, can you build the big highways? These things. So what are the big highways? What is HTML? What is CSS? What is JavaScript? At a very high level, what is front end? What is back end? What is server? What is client? Right? And then you build the inner highways as you go along, and so on and so forth. So, pure time you're giving this mental model to the students directly, rather than giving this and hoping that this is what will happen, which it's not going to happen on its own. In very rare few cases, it's going to happen. So I think that's one big difference. And practically, if I were to show what that leads to, is when instructors join us and start this training, they are given like these assignments or tasks. So this is what they would submit, that if you have to teach complexity analysis, this is like a document. This is the first submission, right? Before the training, or the first day of training. And it's very drab. Visuals are put in just for the sake of it. There's nothing, to do with and this is the same instructor after the training module. This is what they've created on nested loops, which in the early days is one of the most difficult topics to do. I'm not sure if you hear the sound.
Something is getting repeated. And okay, I just told you that if something is getting repeated in number of times, it is called as a loop. So how many loops are you seeing here?
I'll just pause it. I'm not sure if you were able to hear it, but this is just a very small example. And in fact, I remember Yogesh, who's a co-founder and who looks after the soft skills part. He's not from the tech background, but after like just 5 minutes of this, he said, okay, finally, after 3 years of Masai, I've understood what are nested loops. But it's such a beautiful example, and it's a visual you will never forget. And if for the tech janta, I mean, the confusion always is that nested loops or those separate loops mein kya farak hai? How are these two loops interlinked? That's the difficult part to convey. Yahan pe that gets conveyed. That minute hand is dependent on the second hand. Our hand is dependent on the minute hand, and a lot of other things. He builds it up beautifully. So there are lots of examples like this.
That's wonderful. That's absolutely lovely. Raja, those are all the questions that I had for you today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I hope that we can continue this conversation in an informal way the next time you're in office. And thank you for speaking with me and doing the first episode of our podcast. I genuinely do not think of that there is anybody else I would have rather spoken to on this episode. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me thank Rajat, this SVP of Curriculum and Pedagogy. And thank you, all of you, for listening to us and joining us. We'll be back with another episode soon. Until then, cheers.